Hi everyone. Have you ever thought about working in the med device industry, or are you already in the industry and you want to understand how to progress your career, or even like what's next? So, there's never been a better time to work in the med device industry, as the next 10 years will see a great demand for healthcare across the world and accelerations in technology in this space as the AI and digital products are developed and approved for use. So, welcome everybody to our podcast, Our MedTech Lives, in which we interview veterans of the med device industry, learn about their career journeys, what they're proud of achieving and being involved in, and what are the challenges that they had to overcome. We will also touch on different areas of medtech, illustrating the huge variety of careers in this wonderful industry. This podcast actually evolved from a live medtech day we used to run for a major European business school. So, without further ado, we are your hosts,
Silke Riemer.
and Kash Ikram. And today we are honored to welcome James Boye-Doe, who has over 30 years of marketing experience in the medtech industry and is currently the VP of Marketing at ResMed. Today we're going to be covering his experience on the changing world of marketing during his career. Don't forget to subscribe. However, we would really appreciate your thoughts and your comments and any questions you'd like us to cover or any topics you'd like us to cover in the future.
All right, James, please tell us how you got into MedTech.
Yeah, so I'd say it was somewhat by accident, but so first I'll add both of my parents were physicians, so I kind of, healthcare was an inescapable thing for me.
In your blood.
Yeah, it was in my blood, literally. And so I actually got out of university. I was more focused toward going towards the tech space. But I was looking for a career that could align both my healthcare interests and technology. And I had an opportunity to join a medtech company that was willing to take a gamble on someone who's new to the healthcare space. And that's how I joined. And I just got kind of addicted to it and stayed and went from different role to different organization, and it's brought me here today.
Fantastic.
That sounds great, but why marketing? There are so many different jobs in MedTech. Why marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question. From a schooling perspective, I was always had foot in both worlds, like scientific and kind of artistic. So I was an English major, all right, but I was a computer science minor. So I had this duality in me. And when you think about careers that now kind of tap into both sides, both the art and the science, marketing ends up being a really good fit. But that's not where I began, right? So I began kind of as a programmer on the tech side, but I didn't want to kind of be in the back of the lab. And so I wanted to go where the action was and meet with people and be out in the world. And so marketing was a great fit.
Wow. How did you make that transition then from being someone working, down in the bowels of the organization, doing engineering? How did you get yourself noticed to the front end of the organization?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's also kind of a good tip for people who are trying to get into the field, right? So if you have expertise in the product, typically that expertise will be needed in interactions with customers. So I ended up going to a lot of trade shows and events, and so I'd be on the booth, interacting with customers, telling them about the technical aspects of the products and learning from them so there's what we think the technology is for and what customers actually use it for. And so that interplay was always interesting to me. And so I thought, that's an interesting perspective. And so it was that bridge. It was a bridge between understanding the product and then getting to understand the market. And just slowly using kind of that events and communications path is how I got more directly into marketing.
Oh, that's fantastic. So you started to make your links through those congresses and by providing expert. I know, coming from the sales side, and I've done marketing for a long time as well, how invaluable it is to have a real expert on the technical side when you're at a conference or you're meeting with physicians and they ask you these complex questions and you guys are able to in real time either have the information or work it out, which is pretty amazing. Fantastic. And then, so around what year was it that you kind of stepped into the marketing world?
Yeah, so I think I came out of university. So at this point, I was with Bell Labs, kind of a storied innovation engine here in the U.S. And so it was right around, I'll say like 1998, 2000.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to be part of a kind of an internal tech incubator.
Yeah.
And so that's when I made that intentional move. And from there, it kind of didn't look back. I'd say, though, I always kept a really close tie to understand the technology, right? So
Fantastic.
I
The
remain a
reason
bit
I
of a
asked that
tinkerer.
question
Yeah.
is the reason I asked that question is because that was, I mean, the internet was just starting, right? And
Right.
honestly, people were a little bit afraid of what you could or couldn't do, right? So, I remember back then we were told don't post anything about the company on these social media sites, right? Because
Yeah.
we didn't know where the information was going. So it was paper-based, right? Is that how you started? Was it mailers and tell us
Mailers
how-
and brochures, for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
everything was brochures, everything was printed, everything was direct mail. Email was slowly starting to begin, but it really was
Okay.
it was pretty absent. In those early days, and so when I joined my first medtech company, there was actually a gap. So I did some health
Yeah.
tech before, but I joined my first medtech company. What was like 2005 thereabouts,
Right.
and so even then it was still very paper based, and so
Yes.
it was an interesting transition time there.
Yeah, as we move from the paper-based to the digital world.
Yep.
I still remember the shockwaves that went through the company when we were told we will no longer print brochures.
Yeah.
And the salespeople were like, oh my God. Silke, you remember that time when people started saying, no, we will email the brochure? We were like,
Yeah, and I also remember that we took full binders to new customers. When we had a new customer to give him all the literature, we have had huge binders to carry. But there's another aspect I'm interested in, James. I remember when I did a marketing course, and it was really like from all industries. The feedback from the others, we were only two from MedTech, and the others said it's so boring because you have so many regulations. What would you answer to this?
Yeah, so I think about it differently. So one interesting fun fact, direct mail and printed materials are actually making a bit of a comeback because we're
wow.
we're so inundated with messages and apps and emails.
Yes.
I don't know about you, but my email inbox is pretty flooded.
Yeah.
But if you send me a nice direct mail piece, well designed, I'll look
Yeah.
at it. Otherwise, you won't reach me. So
Yes.
don't
Nice.
count out that channel. But when I think about, so there's always this trope around B2B marketing in general. Marketers think is less exciting than B2C. Then on the B2B side, B2B marketers think healthcare is the most boring of the categories. So it just kind of gets beaten down. First of all, I don't think it's true. I think at its heart, healthcare is one of the most important things in our lives.
Yeah.
So the kind of stories and connection you can make to customers and those who care for their patients is significant and deep.
Right.
And it's one of the most considered purchases out of there, out of all industries. So I think I push back in that regard. And then I would say, there's some regulatory constraint, but I think it's aligned to the importance of what we're trying to do. But honestly, it's once you know the guardrails that you can sit within, you have good flexibility. It's just down to the right kind of marketer to be able to tell a story that motivates within those constraints. And I've seen many examples of it. So
I
you get a
agree.
better
You just got to be more specific, right? If you want, you can't say this is the best thing since sliced bread. You have to have evidence that backs up that statement that you're making, right?
Correct.
So, if this is a great treatment for prostate cancer, why, how, and where's your evidence? And if you have the evidence, absolutely, And a good part of the marketing process is, hey, we want to make this claim, but we don't have enough evidence.
Right.
And going back to the internal part of the organization saying, hey, can you please get us this evidence, whether that be, from the engineering department or from the clinical department, right?
Exactly.
To say, please collect me this data so we can make this claim. And that's a fun part of the job as well, right?
It is.
I don't
Yeah,
think-
absolutely.
don't think people selling clothes have to go back to the people who made the clothes and say, find us some evidence that this is more waterproof than, a wax jacket.
No, exactly. And I think it's critical that, again, that input that you have into how we differentiate our products, right? So it's one thing, you can make a claim that you can't really defend. You just have to run another marketing campaign to run another claim. But here, these are actual defendable claims that once you have them, it creates a moat around that product or that business. And that's like gold for a marketer. If you can operate with that kind of advantage, it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. But eventually the goal is the same, right? You're creating a brand that's memorable, that triggers or owns a part of a clinician's brain in this case, right? So you think of BMW, the ultimate driving machine. When they think about your med device product, they should also have that emotional, knowledgeable reaction to it, right? So in that respect, the challenge is still the same, right?
That's right. Yeah. You want to position your product accordingly, right? So whatever box you want to occupy, you want to do everything such that when your target buyer, if it's a clinician, when that clinician thinks about that problem, they think about you first. So you want to be directly associated with it. So what's great for a marketer is that you kind of get to shape how your company or your product is thought of.
Right.
And that's where, like across all industries, it's the marketer's job to shape that positioning and then pay it off in all interactions. And that's where the real fun is.
When we look at artificial intelligence today, does it play a role in your current position already?
Yeah, I think every marketer in the world right now is looking at how generative AI can help with them. So I think the initial use case is more around like optimization and efficiency, right? So how can we do what we're doing faster? And so those activities are kind of going on across the board. And then also, even from a customer perspective, they're doing the same thing, right? So when I think about clinicians, the burden they have around even documentation, right? So they're looking at AI to help them do what they already have to do faster. And so we're doing some of that. But I think the real opportunity for AI in healthcare really has to do with how we think about precision, right? So and that's precision on all fronts. In the product, that precision is, okay, for this particular patient segment or population segment, perhaps this therapy can perform better if we're able to study them that way and use AI to help us target better. And then from a marketing perspective, it's the same thing. These segments of our target population or do these sorts of activities, participate in these types of things, respond to these kinds of messages, we can more dynamically provide them with the information they need to kind of make decisions going forward. So yeah, we're, like all companies, are evaluating AI in all aspects in product and in our go-to-market activities.
Yeah. I want to say your beard looks amazing. And I think you can always trust a guy with a beard.
With
a marketer with a beard.
Yeah, I think the beard, it's trustworthy and important. But you have the glasses, so you have that advantage.
Yeah,
you also look very distinguished and professorial.
Thank you for saying that. At least I have glasses.
You've got more than that. Well,
So you go into work one day and they say,
Yep.
"Hey James, we got this fantastic new product to launch. It does X, Y, and Z, and this is the target. We want to go after gynecologists, right? Neurologists, whatever the discipline.
Yep.
Where do you start, and what are the levers, and what's the information that you need to start gathering when you start that process?"
Right. So typically MedTech companies, and this is a very important call out for marketers. So typically MedTech companies are technology forward. So we very much are deep understanding of the technical ways in which our product can overcome a specific problem. So we know that. Where we tend to be less informed is the totality of the problem that customer is trying to solve. So if it's a surgeon, yes, there's a technical aspect of that step in the procedure that your product participates in, or maybe your product is the entire procedure. So understanding the technical aspects of it. But understand that even that surgeon then needs to, once after the procedure, they probably need to do some work to manage outcomes from that patient, and potentially leading into the procedure, they need to do some things to get ready for that. And then, like I said, there's a documentation, and because the end result is an outcome, and that outcome sustaining over time. Right. And so when I think about the first thing I would want to know is have a really deep understanding of that target audience, right? And so that's where I would begin. I always begin with deeply understanding, in this case, if it's a neurosurgeon, understanding their technical challenge, the overall goals that they're trying to achieve from an outcomes perspective on a patient level, at a practice level with their hospital, et cetera, and start radiating outwards. Because what I want to do when I launch a product is to launch not only the technical aspects of the product, but how it enhances their value in totality. So I start with a deep understanding of their needs and their context. So that's where I begin. Right.
Essentially, what's on your customer's whiteboard when it comes to this? What are the problems they're trying to solve?
That's right. What at 2 a.m. and they wake up and they can't fall asleep? Why? Yes. And how can we help them with that? So that when we go to commercialize, we're talking about those things actually first. And then when the time comes, we start talking about the technical details. We tend to flip it. We tend to start talking about the technical details. Then it becomes this arm race of features versus features across MedTech, which we all know how that tends to go.
Yes.
Whereas you have the opportunity to tell a bigger story.
Yeah.
And I'll touch back to what we were saying before. B2B purchases are very considered purchases. They're very important ones. Yes. And so speaking to the totality of the need is important. And it's separate to if you can do that. There are a number of competitors that we know well that do a good job of this.
Yes, exactly. And then the marketeer's toolbox, you know, I'm thinking the classics like, segmentation, targeting, the Boston Matrix, the various tools that we have. Are these still relevant today? Are they first relevant in MedTech, and are they still relevant in today's digitization type world? Are we still using these tools?
Yeah, I think even more so, right? So I think about as technology advances and AI, for example, is coming to the fore, there's this tendency to believe that you can make marketing somewhat programmatic. Right. Kind of, you just drop this tech stack or this technology into the scene, and then it kind of runs everything. Right. I'd push back on that. I think human skills are much more important. So segmentation becomes even more important because now you can micro segment. Your segments become much smaller, and you have the opportunity to get them to know them much better. So your ability to connect in almost an individualistic way. Is what really separates average marketing from good marketing. And the technology actually helps you do that, but the technology can't figure out that on its own. Yes. And it can't, you still need to have that deep understanding of the customer to market well in that context. So, I think I say here's to the humans, and then here's to marketers who are very close to like these classic disciplines in marketing, like segmentation, like positioning, all the things of the 4 Ps, right? Yes. And getting those orchestrated well is more important now than ever, I actually think.
That's amazing. So if you're an experienced marketeer, but you don't have you haven't worked in the med device industry, for example, your skills are as relevant and as important, right? I think med device companies and pharma companies are very good at teaching you the biological, medical, the procedural, the stuff you need to know, right? But that being good at being an insightful marketeer is not something you can teach, right?
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you totally. I think what I would say is, so 2 things. One, in med device, I know there's always this tendency to look to other markets and other industries rather, and say, wow, they're really doing innovative marketing. We'd love to have some of that here. So there's that. If you're outside of it, you have that going for you. There's this tendency to want what's on the other side of the fence. That's one. But on the flip, it is a highly regulated environment. It's technical in nature, so you have to be comfortable with that. So you have to show that aptitude, the ability to pick up highly technical concepts and humanize them. So I think those are important characteristics. But But yeah, those classic marketing disciplines and skills are critically important. You just need to say, hey, these are how these skills would translate into healthcare, even though I don't have that expertise, but I have a very strong growth mindset, technical aptitude, and here's how I can kind of tackle those things and why I'd be successful. But yeah, absolutely. We tend to be a bit insular. I'll fully admit to that.
Yes.
I think that's true of all healthcare disciplines. We tend to kind of fish from the same pond as far as talent is concerned. But more and more, like in my company and previous companies I've worked for, more and more you see openness to look to other industries. And I think that's a positive thing.
Yeah.
James, you talked about being open to other industries, but how about a change of the job within the company? Because I remember me being a sales rep, and after 3 years being successful in sales, my manager asked me what I think my next step would be. And for me, it was completely logical to say sales manager. And his answer was, I think you should be in marketing for a couple of years, and then you decide whether you want to go on in sales or in marketing, but you should be on the other side to have a deeper knowledge. What would you say to someone, as let's say to a sales rep who would like to develop his career into marketing?
Yeah. So two things. One, I'd say with the right company, and it sounds like we've all been with companies that allow you to do this. The right company will support you in making that move. I think it's to the benefit of the company to have cross-pollination across disciplines, especially disciplines that have to work together, right? So sales and marketing have to work together. So that's a natural kind of conduit back and forth. The other thing I'd say, though, is I'd always ask for that person to interrogate their reason why. If you are making that that journey through marketing so that you can get a more senior role in sales, like that's a different motivation and probably a different experience in the types of roles you would go for than if you say, no, I actually believe that I want to stay in marketing and make that intentional run. Then you may approach that slightly differently. Right. So it kind of relates to what Cash was saying about like the core fundamental marketing skills around segmentation, the four like product positioning in those disciplines, you may not get in all marketing roles. So if your goal is to be in marketing for the long term, your first step should be a role that starts letting you get the fundamentals. Whereas if your goal is maybe to get exposure to marketing and how it's done, and so that you can advance your career in other pathways, you may be in a more execution-oriented role. And that makes total sense. But I think it's important to understand the long-term plan so that you can gauge it correctly. But I think the right company is smart enough to know that it's important to let people kind of innovate their careers inside versus having to leave to get that experience.
Fantastic.
That's a good advice for people listening to this and want to maybe have the next step in the company to consider.
It's awesome, and I agree. Marketing is not something you do in your spare time or in a, it's not a semester away. It's it's a discipline. It's I used to say you can't just say, hey, look, I'm a marketeer, but now I'm going to go into finance and be an accountant for a year. Right. The CFO would not accept that, right? They'd say, well, okay, in that case, I'll go off and I don't know, I'll be a software engineer for a year. And I'm sure the IT head, the CT of the chief technology officer would probably, have steam coming out of his ears, right? But it's perfectly fine for us to say, oh, look, why don't you just go into marketing for a year without considering what about all the skills and knowledge and things that you need to know? It's a discipline, right? It's a discipline that you have to learn and study and know what your tools are to do, just same as an accountant or a software engineer.
That's right.
Right now, you're working in thoracic, right? In the thoracic space.
No, actually, and so sleep health space. Yeah, sleep health, sleep
wow.
and respiratory health. Yeah, so it's a kind of a continuation in some respects of some of the airway marketing that I did early on in my MedTech career.
Yeah, I'm interested. So what kind of diseases have you worked on to help make patients better throughout
my career?
Yeah, I'll be fascinated.
So directly, I covered ENT, right?
Okay.
So all the kind of
Ear, nose, and
structural
throat.
ear, nose,
Yeah.
and throat, all the
Yeah.
structural conditions that affect that. Anesthesiology, right? So
Yeah.
ensuring safe placement and preparation for surgery. So
Yeah.
visualization. You called out thoracic. Thoracic
Yeah.
surgery is near and dear to my heart. I covered
Yes.
that for many years across multiple companies. So
Yes.
they are primarily focused on lung cancer and COPD.
Yeah.
And then as I kind of accelerated in my career and managed multiple disease states, that's where you brought obesity and metabolic health into my experience, gynecologic, benign gynecologic health,
Yeah.
and then general surgery in many respects. But yeah, I have a particular fondness for thoracic
Yeah.
surgery, and I spent many years in it, and so that's the one that features large. But when I think about as I've transitioned into different roles in my
Yeah.
career, I got a particular focus on chronic conditions.
Right.
And my first entree into that was with the obesity and metabolic health work.
Yeah. So you've helped countless people. I think it's impossible to count how many people have benefited from the work that you've done over the years, right? That must motivate you highly and keeps you in this business, right?
For sure. For sure.
And sleep apnea is fascinating because it doesn't just affect the person with the sleep apnea, but it affects his whole family and his whole ecosystem, right? His ability to work, how effective he is at work, and all of that. And I'm saying he, but he, she,
Yeah.
right? That's really
Yeah, I was
impressive.
just saying. Do you want to come work for me? Because I think this is the this is exactly the point. What's so fascinating about I spent most of my career working in inpatient medical device. So most of the
Right.
devices that I sold were used in hospital. But
Right.
now I'm with an organization because now I'm on the chronic condition side. I'm with an organization that's delivering devices and care to the home. And your
Right.
point is spot on.
Right.
If the other people they're in that house with, if they're worried about that person's health, or if they can't sleep because loud snoring and this sort of thing, or they're
Yes.
not able to live their full life because of not getting
Yes.
the proper type and quantity of sleep. Yeah, so it opens up avenues that you wouldn't typically have as a MedTech marketer. Now I can
Yeah.
market
What
to their family members, right? So it's very different approach, and it's kind of enlightening and fascinating. Yeah.
for your marketing? Because I think you still need to do marketing for the doctor prescribing this
Yeah.
device, right? But also to the end consumer, maybe to choose your device over something else. What does it mean in terms of marketing for you?
But
Yeah.
can I jump in here? I think that's a fascinating point, right? Because who the customer is in our business is sometimes not who you think. So let's say there's a patient at home. He's been troubled with sleep apnea, and he needs depending on where he is in the world.
Correct.
Even though he's the end user of the product, he's not the person you sold it to.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
So it depends, and this is
Yeah.
fascinating. So one, Soko, to your point, this is one of the only MedTech role that I've had where there's a significant direct-to-patient component.
Wow.
So you do have to market directly to consumers because and I need to keep checking myself. I keep saying patient because
Yeah.
truly consumers.
Yes.
There are markets where the consumer makes a decision on which product they're going to get. They go into the store to buy that product. They get on the therapy themselves. There are other
Right.
markets where they'll need a prescription and they do need to go through a clinician, but even they will still go to the clinician and make the requests. But
Yeah.
there are others, Cash, to your point, where it's primarily physician-led, and so we're
Yeah.
marketing directly to the physician. But typically, it's marketing to them about this condition, like why should you care about sleep? Why should you care
Right.
about sleep apnea? Here's why you should do something about it. And so
Right.
it's more about motivating them to diagnose.
Yes.
And so there's a whole cascade of stakeholders that are involved in this particular space. So there's
Yes.
the consumer themselves, there's the clinician who cares for them, there's the home medical equipment provider who they
Right.
in many respects actually get the devices from. In some markets, this is handled in a hospital base, so you still have to have all the stakeholders there. So it's market to market. It's quite different go-to-market models. So it's a nice degree of complexity, which for a marketer is a great problem to solve.
I think so. It's you've got many stakeholders who may have a stake in making this decision, and not all of them are clinical, right? There's the financial insurance company, the CFO, or the purchasing manager at the hospital. He's looking to get the best bang for his buck, basically. And he may have a different, if you go to him and talk about how well this CPAP machine works or something, right? He may not be interested in the clinical outcomes because he's seen all of them and all the clinical outcomes are good. He's looking for something else, right? He's maybe looking at, and then the person who has to take it to the hospital and use it, maybe they're looking for portability or ease of use or something that doesn't break down that often, that they don't have to get up and go. There's so many different messages to so many different stakeholders in this process, right? And an amazing thing is the customer in some cases is involved. I've never done direct to consumer. Yeah. I'm a bit jealous that you've done that.
I know. I know. This is my second time doing it. The other time I did that was I was at a tech company actually. Yeah. And we had a direct to consumer side of it. Now, I'm not responsible for the direct consumer work. There's a peer on our leadership team who does that, and she does an amazing job with it, and I'm really excited to work with her. But what's important is that we're two sides of the same coin, and so there's this understanding that those two things are linked. But yeah, I think so. To your point, it's really important, the point that you made around the different messages to the different stakeholders. That's critical, but it's beyond just messages. Like, so I remember when I opened up, I said, in MedTech companies, we tend to be innovation-led. So we start with the features to features construct when we create products. Yes. That works well with the clinician. It does not work with any of the other stakeholders. Right. Because that's not top of mind. Right. So as part of our innovation has to be that voice from marketers who are focused on the hospital administrator, who are focused on the consumer to say, well, hang on, there are these other aspects. Kind of, Silko, to your point, look, I use this machine, I'm lying in bed next to someone else. It's loud. They really don't like that, right? So that's important from an innovation perspective. Or, I wear this, in this case, I'm using some device and maybe it leaves some imprint on my body and I just don't like it to be visible, right? So there are things like that, that those who are closest to markets and all the different stakeholders can bring back to make sure the products you create meet the needs of all the stakeholders. So it's not just about the features and benefits from a technical perspective. Yeah,
fascinating. It's we could talk for hours on this aspect as well, right? Yeah. So the traditional channels that I'm familiar with are like congresses, the sales force, advertising and PR. When you're doing the direct to consumer, though, how are you getting to, essentially, it's a tiny market. If you look at everyone in the US, right, the people who need your product is relatively tiny compared to if you were selling bread or donuts or sneakers, right? How do you find them? How do you get to them?
Yeah, so it's definitely. If we're talking on the consumer side, and to a degree, it's true on the I'll say the provider side as well, but on the consumer side, it's where we tend to get our information. So there's still the tried and true source for healthcare information still is the clinician. So when rubber meets the road, after we go to Dr. Google, we always then actually go to a doctor. So the clinician tends to be really important still. Yes. But then, where do we all spend the balance of our time, right? So it's social media, talking to peers, friends and colleagues. So there are these like online social networks and offline social networks. So these kind of peer connections become really important. So depending on the regulations and markets, how can you participate in those? Right. And how can you participate in those in a way that is not too salesy, right? So you tend to want to show up as being informative and educational. Right. And that's how you tend to reach them. But you really have to, it depends on the market. Wherever they are, wherever they're seeking those kinds of information, that's where you need to be. And so the marketer's job becomes understanding those places, those watering holes really well.
Yes. You'll become a bit of a detective as well.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So James, we have, go ahead.
I have one final question from my standpoint. I want to see if this resonates. When I was a marketeer, I felt like I was the hub in this spoke system, right? So
Yeah.
I was in the center as a marketeer, and I had a spoke going to sales, a spoke going to engineering, a spoke going to logistics, a spoke going to finance, and I was the hub that everything was passing through. I felt sometimes like I was the information, everything came to me and then went out to the. Have you experienced that as well in your career? Because I think that's a fascinating part of our business.
Yeah, I think done well. So they're different. It depends on industry, right? So I think marketers in medtech tend to be that. You tend to be connected to all the things, and so it's whether or not the organization sees you as the hub, meaning you are there with intention as kind of conducting, or if just your resource, we're going to keep tapping into you. Those are very different things.
Yes.
So if you think it's the hub and orchestrator, it's an powerful role. It's expansive. It's like the vision for what marketing should be. And I love that.
Yeah.
But there are other organizations where marketing doesn't have that breadth. So I think it's what you call out there is notable. And I think it's important for marketers to understand that that is part of the role, right? So part of it is to be that connective tissue between these different functions to make sure that the product we put in the market, the solution, the experience resonates with all the stakeholders. And the only way we can do that is for those who are closest to the market to engage. And so, to all those marketers out there, continue to engage across the organization, because that's the only way we're going to have products and programs and campaigns that matter.
Yeah. James, that's why I asked the question. You're so insightful. I love it. Fantastic.
That's right.
I've discussed digitalization since you have joined marketing. We touched on artificial intelligence. Are there any other trends which have caught your interest in medtech or marketing or medtech marketing?
Yeah, so I think adoption of digital tools from a marketing perspective in medtech still lags behind other industries, right? So. I've had the opportunity to market in digital health, in SaaS markets, so software as a service and software side, and so I've got exposure to the different tools or different parts of the marketing mix that gets deployed in those other industries. And we're just nascent in that from a medtech perspective. So digital marketing is it's de facto the way it's done across all other industries, and in medtech we're still in early days of that. How we do, to your point, segmentation and getting really specific to our segments and how we market to them differently. So almost that customized or dynamic marketing is also new. And so those things that are kind of standard in other industries are just starting to come here now, which I think is really exciting because the potential here is great. We've talked about AI, I think from a product perspective, like the ability to get very specific to therapies that are targeting specific conditions, specific demographics, socioeconomic tiers. I think there's vast potential there, especially with all the data that we have access to. Just the world is wide open there, so I'm very excited about that. And I think Gen AI, honestly, I think the ability to take those insights and scale them into different experiences, different creative, different content, different all the things, I think it's just hugely exciting. But, I think technology aside, I like what I'm seeing as far as a resurgence of the importance of those core human skills, understanding how to connect with your audience, understanding the importance of really good storytelling. Yes, even in B2B. Yes, even in medtech, because it's one of the most important industries and one of the most important decisions. And so why not? So I'm excited about all that, and I love. I'm kind of newer to my role here, and I've started to get a lot of inquiries from marketers in other industries wanting to jump in, and that is new. Usually, to your point, like most people say, I don't want to go into healthcare, it's too regulated. But now, I think people are really connected to the purpose of it and are excited by the opportunities, and they're starting to see that the the tool sets that are used in other industries are coming over here as well. So I welcome that. So again, I'm very bullish on the human skills and really helping to shape how we use the technology advancements that are happening.
Fantastic. So you've had a fantastic career. You've worked at multiple companies. You know, you started out, everything was paper-based, cardboard-based, snail mail. And now, you know, you're well entrenched in the digital media world and using it to get to these micro segments that we talked about. When you look back at your career, what were the things, let's say 2 or 3 things you wish you'd known then that you know now?
Yeah. So I think don't underestimate the skills that you bring that are transferable, right? So I had this belief that, I don't know MedTech, maybe the marketing that I do doesn't apply here. No, false. Right. So have full confidence that the skill sets, like those core marketing fundamentals we talked about, translate well. I would say also, it's like, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like, so there are higher stakes in healthcare for sure. Yes. You can't just kind of try new things and break stuff. You have to be a bit more considered. But certainly from a marketing perspective, you have to be willing to give it a go, iterate and improve. So this iteration concept that's prevalent in many other industries and their go-to-market is less so in MedTech. So I think a focus on just improving over time, because you'd be shocked by how much you gain by iterating in that way. And so those are 2 big ones. And then one that I've kind of come to realize later in life is that definitely invest time in developing and maintaining relationships. All right. So Cash, you and I, we've known each other a very long time, right? Yeah. And so the importance of relationships cannot be overstated. From a learning perspective, how you learn about the craft, from a career perspective, what opportunities are open to you, and it's just from a career perspective, that's gold. So I think relationships, growth mindset, and your skills are transferable and valued. And I think had I known those earlier, who knows? Yeah,
that's super. And we've known each other a while, pre-beard, I think even.
Yeah, pre-beard, yeah.
But you've always been an inspiring individual, and I've, always learned from you, sometimes not even directly, but indirectly observed what you've done on the other side of the pond and thought, I'm going to do that, right?
Yeah.
and it's been amazing and inspirational. So cool.
Appreciate it.
So I think with that we're at time, and I just wanted to say, James, this has been so useful. You've given us so much really amazing information. If you're already a marketeer, if you're thinking of being a marketeer in the MedTech, or you're thinking of changing your role, what great. And the fact that there are so many transferable skills, I think there's some great takeaways from the advice you're given. If people want to contact you, they can reach you on LinkedIn.
Reach me out on LinkedIn. I'm fairly open to it, and I welcome to meet with and chat with anyone.
Fantastic. And I know you've done some interesting blogs as well, especially when you started, about being thrown in at the deep end, and I've read those and again been inspired by them. Silke, over to you.
Just say thank you so much. It was so inspiring, and whatever you want to know, we put all the information below the video and any links you might want to follow.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. Thank you, James.
Thank you.